It is 2011. A team of highly trained US Army Special Forces, known as the Green Berets, are silently moving through a thick forest in the endless jungles of Central Africa. Alongside them are battle-hardened Ugandan troops. They are on a mission to capture or kill one of the world's most elusive warlords, whose name has haunted villages in Africa for decades. The intel suggests he is close, hiding nearby, somewhere in the forest of the Congo or South Sudan. The soldiers are armed, trained, and backed by the most advanced surveillance technology in the world. Drones circle above them, tracking every movement on the ground. Satellites watch from above. Every radio frequency, every footstep, every sound is being monitored. This is just one man. Surely this will be over soon, they thought. But then, silence. For a brief moment, everywhere becomes still. Suddenly, they hear movements in the trees, and then sounds of gunshots fill the air. The soldiers soon realize what is going on. They have walked right into an ambush. They fire back, moving quickly through the trees. The firefight was quick but brutal, and just as quickly as it started, it was over. The enemy quickly vanishes, disappearing into the jungle like a ghost. The soldiers searched the area, their hearts pounding fast, but no sign of this man they had come to capture. It is like the jungle itself is protecting him. Footprints in the mud lead to nowhere. Just like that, the man is gone. The commander is furious. They were so close, just like they've always been. For years, intelligence reports placed him within reach. However, he has always been one step ahead. This moment in 2011 was the last confirmed sighting of this brutal warlord, Joseph Kony. But who is this guy? For over 2 decades, Kony and his brutal rebel group, the Lord's Resistance Army, terrorized Uganda and its neighboring countries, kidnapping tens of thousands of children, forcing boys to become child soldiers and girls into sex slavery. His forces strike like ghosts, attacking villages in the dead of the night and disappearing before anyone can fight back. By the time the world started paying attention, thousands had been killed and millions displaced from their homes. The hunt for Kony would go on for more than 3 decades, with the US spending nearly $800 million tracking him, deploying soldiers, training regional forces, and even placing a $5 million bounty on his head. But no matter how close they got, he always got away. The question is, how did a man with no modern army, no major country backing him, and no clear base of operations survive against the most powerful military forces in the world? This is the story of Joseph Kony, Africa's most wanted man.
I'm a human being like you. I'm a military position who is fighting in Uganda. I'm a freedom fighter who is fighting for freedoms in Uganda. But I'm not a terrorist.
Many will argue against that, especially seeing the number of people he had killed while fighting the Ugandan government. But to understand this freedom Joseph Kony claimed he was fighting for, we need to go back to the beginning. On the 9th of October 1962, Uganda became an independent nation, having gained its freedom from the British. But just like most African countries at the time, this young country soon slipped into political instability. The first post-colonial government under Milton Obote was unstable and plagued by different crises. This guy, General Idi Amin, would later capitalize on the political instability to overthrow the government of Obote in the 1971 coup.
The members of the Uganda Army and the Air Force decided to take over from the civilian rule because of the last arrangement which were made by the Dr. Apollo Milton Obote to disarm the whole tribe of Uganda except his own tribe, Langi and Acholi. And also, that is the point which brought all this problem.
The ousted president Obote was offered a sanctuary in Tanzania, where he took refuge. About a year later in 1972, he was joined by around 20,000 Ugandan refugees, fleeing from the brutal rule of Amin. This huge number motivated some to launch an invasion into Uganda in an attempt to regain control of the central government. When the poorly organized coup failed, Idi Amin used this as a pretext to launch a campaign against all those who supported Obote. He purged the Ugandan army of Obote's supporters, mostly those of the Acholi and Lango ethnic groups. The next 8 years would be brutal for Ugandans, especially the people from the Acholi region. There were reports of ethnic persecution. Many Acholi people were either slaughtered in systemic ethnic cleansing campaigns or driven into exile. Now, while the rule of Idi Amin is such an interesting story that I'd love to get into, that, I'm afraid, is beyond the scope of this story. So I'm going to move things along to when he was removed from office. So it's 1979. Idi Amin had just been removed from office after a brutal war with Tanzania. Obote is back in Kampala as president once more, but the return didn't last. By 1985, there was yet another coup, this time led by Acholi faction within the Ugandan National Liberation Army. This was an ethnically motivated military takeover. With Milton Obote removed from power once more, this guy, General Tito Okello Lutwa, an Acholi military officer, was quickly installed as president of the military council. This was a dream come true for the Acholi people, who had felt marginalized by the past government of Idi Amin. They believed this was their moment to rule over the country. But these two didn't last long, as war came knocking once again. The deep-rooted divide in the Ugandan military force was evident when Yoweri Museveni led his National Resistance Army rebels with fighters from Rwandan exiles into Kampala. The fighting that broke out was long and hard. At the end of it all, Okello was gone and in came Museveni. Once again, the Acholi people were on the outside looking in. While Museveni's victory in the civil war ended years of violence in central Uganda, it ushered in another conflict, but this time in the north. The Acholi, who had been prominent in previous regimes, and the National Army suddenly found themselves marginalized and mistrusted by the new government. The defeated northern soldiers fled home, some into neighboring Sudan carrying grievances. Soon enough, reports started circulating of Museveni's NRA abusing people from the north. Whispers of the north's declining influence persisted. This soon formed the volatile backdrop against which a religiously feared rebellion would erupt. Let's take a quick moment to thank the sponsors of today's video, Lemfi, an app that makes sending money to Africa so much easier. If you've got friends or family in Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, or Uganda, Lemfi lets anyone in the US or Canada send money home in minutes with zero transfer fees. It's secure, offers competitive exchange rates, and works within minutes, so you get real value every time. Now, here's the bonus. Sign up using my link or enter my code JUDEBELLA when you make your first transfer of over $100 and you get $20 cash back. How cool is that? Plus, you earn reward points with every transfer that can turn into cash. Check out Lemfi today and don't forget to use my code so they know I sent you. Thank you, Lemfi, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into our story. In 1986, as discontent continued to grow in the north, a spiritual vessel named Alice Auma Lakwena, an Acholi woman, led an insurgency called the Holy Spirit Movement. Blending Christian revivalism with Acholi traditional beliefs, Alice Lakwena promised divine protection to her fighters. She rallied thousands, including Acholi ex-soldiers, to march on the capital Kampala and overthrow Museveni, whom she accused of oppressing the Acholis. Astonishingly, this spiritually charged rebel army swept southwards and nearly reached Kampala before government forces defeated them in late 1986. When this movement failed, Alice Lakwena went into hiding. But her uprising had ignited the idea that spiritual warfare could resist the new regime, and with a void created by her exile, this guy stepped in to lead a new charge. Say hi to Joseph Kony.
We want the people of Uganda to be free. We are fighting for democracy. We want people to be with total democracy.
Shortly after Alice Auma's rebellion was crushed by the Ugandan government, her followers were scattered, lost and searching for direction. In this confusion, Joseph Kony stepped in, seizing the baton of power with a grip that would soon strangle the entire nation. Born around 1961 to a Christian family, Kony had been an altar boy and was steeped in the Christian missionary influence spreading through Uganda at the time. But he also trained as a traditional healer. In early 1987, not long after Lakwena's defeat, Connie proclaimed himself a prophet and claimed to inherit Lakwena's spiritual mantle. At first, he claimed that he was sent to continue her holy war. He gathered the remnants of Lakwena's followers, forming a new rebel group. Initially calling itself the Holy Spirit Movement 2 or Lord's Resistance Movement, Connie's faction would soon be known as the Lord's Resistance Army. But Joseph Kony's version of God's mission was nothing like Lakwena's. Instead of peace, he preached fear. Instead of healing, he brought horror. He told his followers that God had chosen him to cleanse Uganda and create a state based on the 10 Commandments. They believed him.
See, this is the emblem of the Lord's Resistance Army. In the middle of the heart is the 10 Commandments of God. We are fighting to defend the 10 Commandments of God because people are not following the 10 Commandments of God.
But here's the twisted part. He didn't follow a single one of those commandments. Thou shalt not kill, steal, or commit adultery. All these are commandments in the Bible he claimed to believe in. Yet, he would go ahead to order massacres, loot entire villages, and force young underage girls into his bed. Connie saw himself as a divine ruler. And like biblical kings, he believed he was entitled to many wives. But his marriages weren't unions of love. They were abductions. Girls as young as 12 were forced to be his wives. By the 2000s, he had more than 50 wives and over 100 children. When these young girls are not being used in the bedroom, they are on the battlefield fighting in Connie's war, maiming and killing anyone who tries to run away. They were all indoctrinated to believe in this cult-like figure. When the actually civilians hesitated to join him, Connie turned against the very people he claimed to be fighting for. By the late 1980s, the LRA had begun attacking actually villages deemed government-friendly. Connie's fighters, many of them teenagers, carried out vicious reprisals, looting villages, killing and mutilating those seen as collaborators. Connie even justified that killing people was not a crime, as, quote, God did the same with Noah's flood and Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible. In Connie's mind, violence was holy. He believed he was doing God's work, cleansing the world one massacre at a time. In those early years, the LRA absorbed fighters from another actually rebel group that had made peace with Museveni's government in 1988, thereby consolidating Connie's position as the chief rebel leader in the north. But Connie's hold over his fighters wasn't out of love or belief in whatever he thought he was fighting for. Rather, it came from fear. To prove his power, he created bizarre rituals for his soldiers. He made his followers smear shea butter on their skin, saying it made them bulletproof. Before battle, they drank holy water, convinced it would protect them, and those who tried to escape were executed publicly and brutally. This period would go on to set the stage for a long war between Connie's shadowy militia and the Ugandan state. By the early 1990s, Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army had become known for terror in northern Uganda. What started as an actual rebellion against marginalization soon morphed into a fanatical, cult-like insurgency. Kony's forces, often small and mobile, raided villages with brutal efficiency, targeting civilians as much as soldiers. They would swoop down on villages at night, burning huts and slaughtering those in their path. To keep his army growing, he began abducting children. He would raid a village, grab the kids and march them off into the wilderness. He made his new recruits kill their own parents so they would have no home to return to. He told them spirits were always watching, that ghosts of the dead would haunt anyone who disobeyed him. The LRA claimed to fight for the oppressed North, but in reality, they became his worst oppressors. As Kony's terror spread, thousands of children tried to escape. Every night, they left their homes and walked miles to towns, churches, and hospitals to sleep safely, only to return at dawn. They were called the night commuters, who walked every night for years. But no distance was enough to escape Kony's reach. At first, his troops routinely sliced the lips, ears, and arms of their victims. Later, anyone seen riding a bicycle or owning white chickens or white pigs was slain. Kony said he cut off lips to stop people from reporting his whereabouts. Similarly, in an area without phones or cars, he targeted bicycles to stop riders from warning authorities. By the mid-1990s, thousands of children had been enslaved by the LRA. A UNICEF report later estimated some 20,000 to 30,000 children were abducted by the LRA in its prime. As this crisis continued to unfold, the Ugandan government struggled to protect civilians. Entire rural populations were uprooted. By the mid-90s, the government relocated entire villages into protected camps each evening. Despite these measures, the nightmare continued. The LRA attacked refugee camps themselves on several occasions. Various attempts were made to bring peace to the region. In fact, in the early 1990s, Betty Bigombe, a Ugandan minister, opened a dialogue with Kony. There were ceasefires and face-to-face meetings in the bush in 1993 to 1994, known as the Bigombe Talks. At first, he seemed interested in a peace deal. Then, all of a sudden, in 1994, the talks collapsed. While reports of this collapse came after Kony made new demands and Museveni issued an ultimatum for the rebels to surrender, the timing of these hostilities coincided with a third party's introduction into the conflict. This would mark a decisive turn in the war. One of the crucial factors that enabled Joseph Kony to persist through the 1990s was foreign support, notably from Sudan. Uganda and Sudan were bitter rivals at the time, each accused of sheltering the other's rebels. Museveni's Uganda was aiding the Sudan People's Liberation Army, SPLA, in southern Sudan. So Khartoum struck back by turning Kony into a proxy. Starting in 1994, Sudan's Islamist regime under Omar al-Bashir provided the LRA with weapons, ammunition, and safe haven in Sudanese territory. Kony shifted his bases across the border into southern Sudan, where Sudanese military intelligence supplied him and even allowed the LRA to set up camps. In return, Kony's fighters at times fought alongside Sudanese forces against the SPLA rebels. This state sponsorship gave the LRA a lifeline. What had been a ragtag insurgency suddenly had access to AK-47s, landmines, and steady supplies, enabling Kony to intensify his guerrilla war. Sudan's support also let the LRA adopt a key survivor tactic: sanctuary in the vast wilderness. The southern Sudanese bush and later the remote Congo forest provided a near impenetrable refuge for Kony. He became a master of hiding in plain sight in this jungle. When the 2000s came around, Kony had survived numerous Ugandan army campaigns. His Lord's Resistance Army, though never large, proved impossible to eradicate. Thanks to Sudanese patronage, brutal discipline, and Kony's mystical personality. The human cost, however, was devastating and increasingly drawing international attention. With the violence spreading beyond its borders, the Ugandan government knew they had to act. So in 2002, they launched an attack against him, codenamed Operation Iron Fist. Thousands of troops crossed into Sudan to try and end the LRA for good. For a moment, it looked like Kony might finally be caught and brought to justice. But then, everything fell apart. Kony retaliated with brutal force. His fighters raided refugee camps, slaughtering entire communities in northern Uganda and eastern Equatoria, which is now part of South Sudan. One of the worst massacres came in 2004 when LRA fighters stormed the Balonyo internally displaced persons camp, killing over 300 civilians. The war reached a point where almost 2 million Ugandans were forced into 251 IDP camps across northern Uganda for their own safety. These camps were meant to protect them, but they soon became death traps. Disease, starvation, and violence thrived within the overcrowded camps. In 2004, another Operation Iron Fist was carried out by the Ugandan and Sudanese army. The aim of this mission was to capture Kony, but still, he was nowhere to be found. But the mid-2000s soon marked a turning point in this conflict. After nearly 2 decades of bloodshed, the LRA was finally driven out of Uganda. Sudan's support for the LRA was also waning, but this was not just out of the blues. Several things had led to this moment. For example, in 2005, Sudan's North-South civil war ended, removing Khartoum's incentive to host the LRA. That same year, the International Criminal Court in The Hague unsealed arrest warrants for Joseph Kony and his top commanders, accusing them of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The ICC indictment, which was the court's first ever, charged Kony with ordering some 10,000 killings and abduction of 24,000 plus children. This global pressure was coming on the back of the US designation of the LRA as a terrorist organization in 2001. Soon enough, Sudan finally withdrew all of its open support, making Kony's position increasingly dangerous. Sensing the changing fortunes, Kony agreed to peace talks mediated in Juba, South Sudan, starting in mid-2006. For a moment, hope returned. People thought this would soon be over. Kony even emerged from hiding to meet mediators, his first public sighting in 12 years, and he sent delegates to negotiations. But when it was time to sign the peace agreement, Kony kept dragging his feet. He repeatedly failed to show up to sign the final peace agreement in 2008, demanding that the ICC drop its indictment first. When his demand for immunity wasn't met, Kony abandoned the talks and resumed his hostilities. By late 2006, Kony and the LRA had already slipped away from Uganda, taking their war across the borders. They established new bases in the remote Garamba National Park in northeastern Congo, that is the DRC, and roamed the frontiers of South Sudan and the Central African Republic in these barely governed areas. The LRA continued to pillage and abduct, though in smaller bands. Uganda's neighboring countries, which had been bystanders during the Ugandan conflict, now became victims of Kony's fighters. And to help you understand the reach of the LRA in this region of Africa, here's a list of African countries affected by Kony's activities and the group's actions in each of these countries. Uganda, believed to be the epicenter of the LRA's insurgency from 1987 to 2006, northern Uganda, especially the Acholi sub-region, endured massacres, mass abductions of children, and the displacement of up to 2 million civilians into protection camps. The LRA killed an estimated 100,000 Ugandans during its campaign, terrorizing villages with mutilations and midnight raids. By 2005, the region was in a humanitarian crisis, with a whole generation traumatized or growing up in camps. And when you move over to South Sudan, initially Sudan's southern region served as a safe haven for the LRA in the early 1990s. With Khartoum's backing, the LRA used towns like Juba and the Imatong forest as sanctuaries. The rebels periodically attacked southern Sudanese civilians and fought the SPLA rebel army on behalf of Sudan's government. But after Sudan's 2005 peace deal, the LRA left, but later re-entered what became independent South Sudan. In 2008, for instance, LRA units in western Equatoria massacred villagers and abducted children, spreading terror in South Sudanese communities as much as they had done in Uganda, although this time in smaller scale. And then over at the Democratic Republic of Congo, the LRA moved into the DRC's Oriental province around 2005 to 2006, making camp in Garamba National Park, a vast wilderness. From there, they launched deadly incursions against Congolese villages. The most infamous were the Christmas massacres of late 2008. In a wave of coordinated attacks between December 24, 2008 and January 2009, LRA fighters slaughtered at least 620 Congolese civilians and abducted more than 160 children. Entire villages were left littered with human corpses. Human rights investigators found blood-stained clubs and axes used in these killings. Further LRA massacres ravaged northeast Congo in 2009 and 2010, including the Makombo massacre of December 2009, where 321 villagers were killed and 250 abducted over a few days. And over at Central African Republic, after 2008, the LRA also moved out into the Central African Republic's remote southeast region. They reportedly crossed the border from DRC into Central African Republic, raiding towns like Obo, Zemio, and Rafai. Even as late as 2016 to 2017, long after leaving Uganda, LRA remnants were still kidnapping hundreds of civilians in this country, using them as porters and sex slaves. Each of these countries paid huge prices for Kony's survival. By 2010, the LRA's overall tally was grim. Over 100,000 killed across Central Africa, 60,000 children abducted or recruited by some estimates, and millions displaced over the decades. The militia that began in one Ugandan district had grown into a regional threat. Then came the international manhunt to take down Joseph Kony. As the LRA's atrocities spread beyond Uganda, international efforts to stop Joseph Kony intensified. The pivotal moment in global awareness came in 2012 with a viral documentary called Kony 2012, which implored the world to act. But even before that campaign, a multinational military initiative was already underway. In December 2008, Uganda, DR Congo, and South Sudan launched Operation Lightning Thunder, a US-supported offensive to finally hunt down Joseph Kony in Congo. With American intelligence and logistical backing, fighter jets and commandos struck the LRA's camp in Garamba. However, Kony narrowly escaped. One Ugandan raid on an LRA hideout in 2008 captured nothing but a wig and a guitar he left behind. In subsequent years, the task of neutralizing the LRA fell to an international coalition. In 2009, the United States officially listed the LRA under the War Crimes Rewards Program and later offered a $5 million bounty for information leading to Kony's arrest. In late 2011, US President Barack Obama deployed about 100 US Special Forces to Central Africa to assist regional armies in tracking the LRA. These US Green Berets and military intelligence experts set up operational bases in Uganda, the Central African Republic, South Sudan, and DRC, providing training, drones, and communication support to African units hunting down Joseph Kony. The American deployment, which was codenamed Observant Compass, grew to include around 250 US personnel by 2014, along with high-tech surveillance planes. Meanwhile, the African Union formally joined the fray. In March 2012, coincidentally as Kony 2012 blew up, the AU announced a 5,000-strong regional task force to coordinate the hunt. This force, led by Uganda, included troops from the Central African Republic, DRC, and South Sudan. Ugandan soldiers who knew the enemy best formed the backbone of field operations, while US advisors helped with intercepting the LRA radio chatter and dropping pamphlets urging fighters to defect. Over these years, thousands of leaflets were scattered and speaker trucks blared messages in Acholi, encouraging LRA members to come out of the bush under an amnesty program Uganda had initiated back in the 2000s. This strategy did yield results. Roughly 13,000 rebels, mostly low-level fighters, took amnesty and laid down arms over the years. This significantly weakened Kony's army. One by one, Kony's top lieutenants were removed from the battlefield. In 2013, Senior Commander Okot Odiambo was killed by Ugandan forces, and in 2015, infamous LRA Commander Dominic Ongwe, himself a former abducted child, surrendered in the Central African Republic. Ongwen was later handed over to the ICC and convicted on 61 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Yet, Joseph Kony himself remained elusive. Despite the sophisticated manhunt, Kony evaded capture year after year. The manhunt spanned vast and wild territories, from the equatorial rainforest of the Congo to the savannas of Central African Republic. The cost of the mission to get Kony was enormous. The United States alone poured an estimated $780 million into the anti-Kony operation since 2008. Other Western donors and the affected African government spent hundreds of millions of dollars on military efforts and rehabilitation of LRA-affected areas. By 2017, a full decade after the big push began, patience was running thin. The US and Uganda, seeing the reduced threat from the LRA, both re-evaluated the mission. In March 2017, the African Union-led task force was officially halted. Ugandan forces announced they were suspending the chase and pulling their 1,500 soldiers home, declaring the mission to neutralize the LRA has now been successfully achieved. As for the man Kony, He remains a wanted man, just not worth the chase anymore. Sometime this year, the International Criminal Court is set to commence Kony's confirmation of charges hearing, even though they don't know his whereabouts. Strange.
I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty.